All right, guys, we are rolling. I'm thrilled to welcome back Bronson Dant to the Low Carb Consultant podcast. Bronson is a seasoned performance coach, exercise scientist, and author who spent nearly 2 decades helping athletes and individuals optimize metabolic health, body composition, and mindset through evidence based nutrition and training. In our original episode, which was actually episode number 1, Bronson was my first guest. We laid out the foundation for ketogenic nutrition, movement, and metabolic resilience. In this follow-up episode, we're digging deeper and offering a contrasting viewpoint to my recent episode with Dr. Sarah Zaldivar in regards to some of her claims around stepping away from the carnivore diet to bring in carbs to improve workout performance, muscle building goals, and baseline dopamine. Bronson is here to challenge some of those claims, refine the nuance, and ask the tougher questions we often avoid. So Bronson, man, it's so awesome to have you back. I have a feeling this is going to be a good one, man.
I hope so. I hope people get a lot out of it. You
Yeah.
guys called me out on your video, so I felt like I had to come back and be like, okay, if you guys are going to call me out, then I got to respond somehow and provide my perspective.
Sure. Well, in regards to the call out, I think what I said in my episode with her was, if you're familiar with Bronson, I can hear him completely losing his shit on this. And she was like laughing and joking, but it turns out you might
I
have watched.
was,
Yeah.
I was sitting there so I streamed it to, sometimes when we watch these, videos and stuff, we stream it to our TV. So I'm sitting in front of my TV on my couch and the steam just coming out of my face. No, it wasn't that bad. But no, definitely, there was definitely a lot of claims and a lot of things that were said that I want to, like you said, I really appreciate that at the beginning, talk about the nuance, and clarify, because here's what I'm seeing happen, and I'm being contacted. I know a lot of my colleagues are being contacted by followers, subscribers, and clients who are kind of freaking out. And I don't think it's fair what many of these influencers are doing right now in talking about their story, about how they've made decisions to change based on whatever reason it is. I don't care. Okay. But then making scientific claims that I would say aren't valid.
Hmm.
And then saying that carnivore or keto is going to hurt people. It's going to make you sick, or if not directly saying it, using the storyline of, I did keto until it didn't work and I started having problems, and then I had to include carbs to make it better. That message is, number one, confusing, because many of these influencers have spent the last year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years telling everybody that carbs are bad. But now all of a sudden, you've got thousands of followers that you're telling, oops, sorry, I was wrong. We need carbs. You have to have them in order to be healthy. And this is what you have to do now. Sign up for my next program, even though I spent the last 6 years not knowing what the hell I was talking about. Right. It's just, I think there's a confusion. There's a somewhat in some cases, perhaps blatant disingenuousness. But I think in general, the end product is people that have made this choice and have seen progress are now being told they should be afraid of what is working for them. And that is what I have a problem with.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to respond to some of these things.
Sure. And I know, just so for the listeners and the audience and everyone that's listening, so Bronson had sent me over like a list of talking points essentially that he had made when he was watching Dr. Sarah Zaldivar's interview with me, that we can kind of essentially go through here. But we were talking offline before we started recording, and I kind of wanted to go back and touch on this because I did think that this was an interesting point that you had made. And I've got two, maybe to play a little bit of devil's advocate here, just on the other side, because going back to Dr. Zaldivar's interview, I think what was happening for her reasoning for bringing carbs back into her diet was not necessarily because she was saying, keto is bad or whatever the case is. And I know that she had made some statements that kind of sounded like that. But for her specifically, it was performance based. She wanted a little bit more performance within the gym. She had muscle building goals that she felt like she was not able to attain on a low carb or zero carb or ketogenic diet, that she felt like she was seeing progress with when bringing in carbs. So that's one point. The other point in regards to some of these other influencers, and I want to get your 2 cents on this, is, I agree. We are seeing a lot of other influencers now coming out. They've built these huge followings, you know, around carnivore and how that diet improved their life. But it seems like to me, though, just to offer up the the opposing side here, maybe like I said, playing devil's advocate, it seems like to me that they were running into issues that they felt like they were over time trying to play around with while being on a ketogenic diet or a carnivore diet, and they couldn't rectify. So they did start bringing in carbs. And from what I'm seeing, some of them are starting to feel better. So I guess my question for you here is, when it comes to some of these like long-term carnivore people that are running into these issues, but maybe the ketogenic diet, maybe because their body adapted, whatever the case is, a carnivore diet isn't working for them anymore. Like, is there anything wrong with actually bringing in the carbs to maybe offset some of the issues or the challenges that they were running
Sure,
into?
sure. Yeah, this is where, and Nat and I may be doing a part 2 of our talk from last Sunday, this Sunday, about this very thing. Um, no, if you want to include carbs to resolve whatever symptoms or issues you are experiencing on any diet, if you for whatever reason you feel like, hey, I need to get more resveratrol in my diet, so I'm going to start drinking a glass of wine every day, your individual prerogative. Have a blast. If you think it's going to make a difference and you see and you feel that it does make a difference to improve your life, fantastic. There's nothing that I or anybody else can say to tell you that is wrong, right? My target for having these conversations is not to marginalize or invalidate anybody's individual choice. I am here to protect the population, the people that listen to me, that trust me with information, to protect them from feeling like they are being told they don't have a choice and that
Hmm,
they have to do this because carbs are required to be healthy. That is not a fact,
sure, I would
right?
agree.
So there's a fine line, and there is a lot of nuance in here where there's minimum effective dose. What is the minimum change you need to make in order to see progress? That
Hmm.
could be adding something in, that could be taking something out. There's also the idea that the dose is the poison. There is some level of carbohydrate intake that different people can tolerate before they start seeing dramatic or acute issues in their daily life.
Hmm.
Sometimes that is immediate. If I have ice cream, immediately the next day I start cramping, I have headaches the next day, and I am inflamed like crazy. It's acute for me. Other people could go 6 weeks having cheese and don't have any problem, then all of a sudden they break out in psoriasis, right? Other people could have Brussels sprouts a couple times a week and go for months or years and not any problem. Then all of a sudden they have gout. Like it's going to be different for everybody.
Sure, agree.
But understanding that if carbs are not essential, which is still true, adding them in, while it may be beneficial in one area, it may also be negative in another. And it is up to you as a person to make that decision and educate yourself on what those potential risks are. So this is not a judgment on anybody's decision. This is an understanding that carbs can be harmful. Carbs can be beneficial. It's all based on what your definition of health is, what your definition of success is. If somebody is following Dr. Chapey's version of carnivore, any mention of a plant, they are going to perceive as being not beneficial, and it won't make sense for them, right? Somebody who's following, I don't know, Dr. Boz is going to have a different idea about someone telling them they need to lower their fat and increase their protein. She's much more lower on the fat or lower on the protein, higher on the fat. So if you propose to them a different way to implement a ketogenic diet, they're going to balk at that initially, saying, that's not what I believe works for me. So neither of them are wrong. They're individual choices based off of the understanding of how a ketogenic diet works. Right. So that's really the core of what I want to, we have to get away from, um, I'm being attacked because of this, or this is the best way to do it. The best way for you, and I would call out any influencer who is using absolutes, one, and or making claims based on scientific mechanisms that they need the carbs because ... There are no scientific reasons for that. Okay. And this is where we get into, well, but this mechanism does this, right? If I have carbs, it increases my FGF21. And so I burn fat faster. Who cares? That's one mechanism, an entire picture of how your whole body works. If you look
Mm-hmm.
at the whole picture, the impact of doing that doesn't last. The minute you stop or change something else, it now changes and fluctuates other hormonal factors. So we have to weigh any choice we make with the pros and the cons and then make our decision. But when you have people coloring the discussion of the pros and cons, that's where I feel like I need to step in and clear the floor.
Yeah.
So that's what this is about.
Fair. Okay. So let's jump into it here a little bit. Maybe just like a basic place to start here. What was the biggest issue you had with some of the claims that she was making in terms of like, if we just had like a priority number one here to start off with?
Yeah. In that interview, I didn't really hear any solid explanations. There was a lot of claims being made, but no real solid explanations, um, as far as to how or why that claim fits in the big picture. Um, and we'll talk about what some of those are as we go down. Several of the claims were inaccurate. So I have to say, like, that's not how things work. That's not what we see in the data. It claims like you can't build muscle. Not a thing. Things like you need the carbs for exercise. Not a thing. And we'll get into that because I'm actually doing some active research in those areas right now.
Okay.
Um, One of the biggest perspective shifts that need to be made in the conversation is identifying, like I said before, what are we really talking about? I would say a majority of the people that I've seen who are making changes in primarily focused on weight loss. And while they're using and or saying it's a cortisol thing, it's a thyroid thing, it's a whatever thing,
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't know any of them who've actually gotten any of that tested and have numbers to show that it really is that thing. There may be some that have put some out. I haven't seen any of it. So to me, there's a lot of the claims I think are unsubstantiated. And one of the things that we see all the time is people saying they feel. You said it in your description of it. You said it 3 times. Feel, right?
Mhm.
That she felt like this. She felt like this. She felt like she couldn't work out or develop any muscle. She felt like there was this, right? A lot of it is feelings. And, Coach Nat called this out on a video we did last week. We say N equals 1 all the time,
Mhm.
that this is an N equals 1 experience. It can't be an N equals 1 if you're not tracking and collecting data.
That's fair. That's
It's
fair.
completely subjective otherwise. So a lot of people are making changes and making claims based on how they feel and assuming that they feel this way because of something without actually knowing if it's that thing,
So
right?
here 100%. I agree with you there. I agree with you there. Here's where this is where I think things can get interesting here because this after I did the episode with her and you started reaching out to me, I started doing a lot of thinking in terms of like just ketogenic diets, carbohydrate diets when we're leveraging these when we're starting to change things up. And I would agree with you that we're seeing a lot of these carnivore influencers, if you will, start bringing in carbs. But what I would also throw out there, and I want to get your 2 cents on this, a lot of these carnivore influencers, they are not athletes, right? I would say they're not athletes at all. Maybe they've jumped on a carnivore diet to heal certain autoimmune issues initially, health issues. Like you said, maybe it was weight loss, metabolic things. Fair, okay? But what would you say for some of the, like maybe myself or even yourself, because I know you are an athlete just like I am. Um, what would you say though for the people that are ketogenic or carnivore that are trying to increase workout performance, whether it's weight lifted, whether it's running, sprinting, muscle building, and they are starting to bring in carbs to build that up. Because I think that going back to, because I know Dr. Zaldivar is obviously not here, that was one of the main reasons why she started to bring carbs back in, because all of her research is based off like baseline dopamine. And in regards to increasing baseline dopamine, to do that, you have to increase performance. And to increase performance, she was suggesting bringing in the carbs to help to facilitate that, whether it's lift more weight, whether it's run faster, sprint faster, do more in the gym, PR, whatever the case is. And the reason why I bring that up is because, and I'm just going to straight up here be honest with you, Bronson. What I do notice with myself, and I know you talked about feelings and not collecting actual data, but this is what I do notice when I play around with certain carbohydrate levels. I feel phenomenal on a ketogenic diet, carnivore diet. Feel phenomenal, and I'm absolutely shredded, right? And I'm lean. But when it comes to me doing like a squat program or me doing a strength program and I'm trying to increase weight, what I do notice is that when I bring in carbs, I'm able to increase weight. Yes, I'm a little bit more fluffy, maybe because it's water retention, whatever the case is. I'm not as ripped. And I don't feel as good as I did on strict carnivore or keto, but my workout performance is significantly better. And the reason why I bring that up is because some of these some of these doctors and influencers bringing in carbs, they're not athletes. They're not working out at the level that we are. Is
Right, which
there
would
which
which would indicate there's even less of a need.
exactly 100%. That's
Right.
exactly what I'm saying here. So I guess it's like a two-part question. For them specifically, if they're not athletes and they're bringing in carbs, why would that maybe be the wrong route for them to take when they can maybe take a different route, whether it's flipping their protein, their fat macros, whatever the case is? Why would that be potentially a wrong route? And then for an athlete, why could bringing in carbs be the right route? Does that make sense? I know that was a long question.
Neither of them are either.
Okay.
Neither are the right or the wrong. It depends on what you're willing to work through or take a risk of, right?
Mm,
So, and we'll talk about the non-athlete first.
okay.
From a non-athlete perspective, as most people will tell you, carbs have been their problem forever, right? The things that, and it's not, and here we want to clarify this because when we're saying carbs, the actual molecule of a carbohydrate is probably third or fourth on the list of the actual problem, right? It's just that in the grand scheme of things, when we talk about carbs, we are by default, because it's all munged together, we're talking about chemicals, processed foods, seed oils, who knows what else, high energy dense foods with little nutrition. We're talking about foods that are not bioavailable or nutrient dense. We're talking about a whole subset of foods that are less foods and more material, more, I wouldn't even call most of it food, right? We're talking about anti-nutrients. We're talking about a lot of things that come with the puzzle. So it's hard to distinguish between the carb molecule macronutrient and how that's delivered. If we separate the two, the discussion gets a little easier. But
Hmm.
in the grand scheme of helping somebody make decisions about how they should eat every day, then step number one, screw macros, stop eating fake food, right? That's the goal. Stop eating fake food. Stop drinking alcohol. Stop drinking eating or drinking anything with a label. Those are the primary things when we talk about just nutrition. From there, we talk about carbs. Then we're getting a little bit more mechanistic. We're getting more into the biology of how your body actually utilizes macronutrients and metabolic function, right? If we can separate those two things and just make that distinction from the unhealthy, not even the unhealthy, but the non-athletic person, there is no need for it because your body can do everything it needs to do without it. Okay, so much like fitness is, and you'll be familiar with this, much like fitness is the same in type, not intensity, right? The type of work that an Olympic lifter and a grandmother need to be able to do are the same, but the intensity is different. We all need to move and function similarly, but the intensity that we do that with based on what we're trying to do in our lives is going to be different.
100%.
So what I'm about to say for the unhealthy, unathletic person, it goes for the athletic, healthy person as well. Okay. There is no need for it. Your body can do what it needs to do. Introducing something that your body doesn't need, by definition, makes your body do extra things in order to manage it, right? It doesn't need it. So if I'm going to give it, there has to be a specific use case that I'm doing it for. And I have to understand that there is a level of overhead that I'm adding to my function. Okay. So can carbs provide quick energy? Absolutely. They can provide energy for a workout. When you eat carbs to perform a workout, if anything, the least of the worst case scenarios is it is reducing your body's ability to process and utilize and create its own energy. So when you eat carbs, you reduce metabolic flexibility.
Yes. Okay. Got it.
Okay. That
Agree.
is contrary to what a lot of people are being told about what metabolic flexibility is. I need to be clear on that as well. Metabolic flexibility is not the ability to digest carbs. If I eat carbs and I feel like crap, that is a immune response to me putting something toxic in my body.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That it does not mean my gut isn't healthy. That doesn't mean that my body is fragile. That doesn't mean that I have lost diversity in my gut and I'm no longer optimized, because there's no requirement to eat carbs. If there's no requirement to eat carbs, then why do I have to maintain an enzymatic or gut biota that is primed to eat carbs? That's logically inconsistent. Okay. So if I do eat carbs and I eat carbs enough to the point where my body adapts to that intake and no longer has as negative a reaction, it's still a negative reaction. My body has just adapted to it because I've continually stimulated it.
Got it. And that's what
Okay.
essentially, quote unquote, makes you metabolically flexible, is the ability to switch between the two fuel sources with as
No. So what you're saying is metabolic flexibility, but has nothing to do with the gut, with the processing of it.
got it.
Metabolic flexibility is 100% internal. The only way to improve metabolic flexibility is through training adaptations, by training harder,
Mm-hmm.
okay, or removing substances that hijack oxidative priority, which is alcohol and carbs. And I don't want to get into this too much, but exogenous ketones as well.
Interesting.
Okay. Because those are all external. External sources of fuel take priority over internal sources of fuel. Anything that you do that is going to take away from your body's internal processes to generate and utilize and manage its own energy systems, you are decreasing metabolic flexibility. And that
Interesting.
is not really beneficial for any purpose, whether you're sick, healthy, fit, unfit, athletic or not.
But I guess maybe to a point there then, but doesn't it kind of depend on what the ultimate goal of the individual is? Like if the
Yes.
individual is trying to get absolutely ripped, like, okay, then we want to prioritize using stored body fat as a fuel source, like a bodybuilder cutting for a show or something, or like whatever the case is. Bodybuilder cutting for the show, you want to prioritize using fat as a fuel source, your own body fat as a fuel source, so we can lose body fat, get lean.
Why would that ever change?
Well, I guess on the flip side of that, if you're an athlete that's looking to increase performance, would you even care? Like, at that point, like, of course, we all wanna stay lean and look lean, but if you have certain goals that take priority, for instance, certain intensity goals in the gym, you're an Olympic weightlifter, you're trying to put more weight overhead, you're doing, like, a small of squat program or whatever, and you're trying to add weight to, like, a specific movement, like back squatting, you might wanna increase your exogenous energy sources, whether it's carbohydrates or fat, in order to fuel that workout, push the intensity, and surpass plateaus.
If things worked the way we thought they did.
Hmm.
Okay. Here's the deal though. Metabolic flexibility is measured as positive when it's improved across all sports modalities. So if you are, the more metabolically flexible you are, the
Mhm.
better your performance in athletic endeavors is going to be,
Okay, I
right?
agree. Yep.
The better your metabolism functions, the better you will perform. So that leads to the idea that, wait a second, if that's the case, then how are we saying we need something outside of our metabolic flexibility in order to fuel performance, right? If metabolic flexibility is a mark of improved capacity, then metabolic flexibility is the base of performance, not exogenous fuel sources. Okay.
Got
So
it.
what we're looking at is where the crux of what my research is right now. So I'm getting my doctorate. I don't know if we talked about that. We didn't talk about that before. I'm in a doctoral program right now. My focus is on ketogenic sports nutrition, and I'm looking at how do we rewrite the current paradigm of sports nutrition and base it in the ketogenic context, because that's really where we see more benefit. And some of the research I'm doing right now, I have one paper, I'm doing a systematic review right now of carb supplementation in CrossFit athletes, right? We're looking at a bunch of different studies that say if we add carbs in before a workout or during a workout, what kind of improvements to CrossFit performance is there? Right now, there's zero.
Mm, interesting.
Okay. So right now, the data that I'm seeing in the papers in multiple different studies is carb supplementation does not improve CrossFit performance.
Interesting.
Okay. Other things I'm looking at, we're
Can I just
doing,
jump in there, Bronson,
yeah, yeah.
really quick, though? So, I mean, that is an interesting statement to make, because I would feel like if you were to sample, interview a bunch of games athletes, right? They would probably disagree with that.
Oh,
Would that be
sure they
fair?
would, but they're also
Yeah,
doing PEDs and who knows what else. Games
sure.
athletes is games athletes isn't who we're targeting with this. We're looking at general
General population.
recreational, maybe regional athletes kind of
Okay.
thing, right?
Okay, fair.
Right. Anytime we get into the professional athlete, you're looking at outliers that have a lot of other things going on that really make it difficult to kind of say, how does
That's
this
fair.
apply to the general population, right? So we're looking at more general population study.
Okay, okay, that's fair. Got it.
Right? Because it's also more indicative of what the population is,
Fair.
right?
No,
When we're looking
I
at
would
that.
agree. Yeah, that makes sense.
So what we're seeing is that regardless of habitual diet, and most of the habitual diets we can say for sure are pretty carb based, right? And the reason why this study is going to be important is because at the base, one of the things I want to try to explain and get out there in the literature is that even if carbs are beneficial, we're prescribing and recommending more than is needed.
Mm,
We don't
yeah,
need 20 grams, 30 grams, 40 grams every time we work out. We don't need, when we're doing a marathon, we don't need 200, 300 grams an hour to run. Like there's a whole bunch of people that cram a whole bunch of carbs in their face and it's doing nothing for them other than causing oxidative stress and increasing risk of injury, glycation in muscle tissue, and all gut stress and a bunch of other things, right? We're essentially, my understanding of the way I'm seeing it more and more every day is that athletes are overdosing on carbs and we could do with a lot less.
and that makes sense, and, to be honest, Dr. Zaldivar was talking about this a lot, like, it's basically dose dependent, like, she basically said the exact same thing in the interview, like, it's like, you if you're gonna bring in carbs, you kinda like what you said earlier, it's almost like, the dose makes the poison.
Mhm.
Right, where it's like, if you're bringing in too many carbs, that's when you can run into a lot of issues, but you have to know based off where you're at, body composition, and a lot of other factors, you have to
With,
know. Yeah,
yeah,
you have to know the exact amount of carbs to bring in so you don't like run into this like surplus of energy and run into all these issues that
Don't
I think you're getting at.
Right, but I would caution against doing it because you think you have to.
Got it.
You don't need carbs to perform. All right, here's a couple other things to take a look at. There was a meta-analysis. I'm actually doing a video. I got to record a video this week to kind of summarize this meta-analysis. Came out a month ago, almost 34 days ago it was published. A meta-analysis of ketogenic diet's impact on strength, performance, metabolic markers, and a couple other things. And they basically said, from a strength perspective, from a muscle mass perspective, from an endurance perspective, from a body composition perspective, from a metabolic performance perspective, there is no difference between a carb-fueled athlete and a ketogenic athlete. You can grow muscle, build strength, perform endurance activity, and if you're in a body weight ratio to strength sport, you're actually going to see an improvement in performance because you're going to lose body mass without losing muscle mass,
Which that
or
would be
fat
like
mass
Olympic
without
weight.
losing
That
muscle
would be like
mass.
Olympic weightlifting to be
Right. So if you're
be
in a
specific.
sport where you need to be strong, but you can go to a lower weight class, or you
Yeah.
can have a lower weight and still have the strength, you're going to actually see improvements in performance. A lot of the evidence against ketogenic diets from a sports performance perspective are, one, if you look at a lot of the stuff in the last 20 years, most of it is theoretical conclusions based on mechanistic function. Right? They look at, oh, well, this happened to this metabolite, or this happened to this enzyme when such a thing, or this hormone response over here when fat was increased or fat was lowered or carb was lowered or whatever change they did, or this happened in mice, mTOR X, Y, or Z, whatever. They've taken a lot of these mechanisms and then made conclusions about what that means for performance. And then that just kind of became the law of the land. The other piece of it is there's a lot of information, and I guess I can say something. We just had a paper published this week. I did a paper with Peter Cummings, Philip Prinz, and Professor Noakes on the misinterpretation of VO2 max and metabolic performance. And there is a sweeping trend across the world. The way that we look at performance is oxygen based, right? VO2 max, percentage of VO2 max, work effort at steady state, whatever, submaximal intensity, et cetera. Efficiency in how somebody performs is often determined to be reduced or declined the more fat they oxidize, because oxygen cost goes up. When you oxidize more fat, it's only aerobic, so you're burning more oxygen to do that. So because the cost of oxygen goes up, the amount of oxygen that you process or utilize at a set level of work is higher, it's assumed that you're working harder to maintain that level of effort, right? Except for the fact that if you're a fat adapted athlete and you're running an RER of 8 at 85% or 80% of max, or at, X amount of time of duration effort, where the normal carb person is going to be running at almost, a max intensity in all carbs, that changes the equation that nobody accounts for, right? As a fat adapted athlete, at baseline, I'm burning more fat than the normal person. So at baseline, I'm already inefficient. But at the same time, if I take someone who's not trained at all and I have them do an endurance training program for 3 or 4 weeks, and they increase their fat oxidation and metabolic flexibility, their VO2 goes up, they're burning more fat, their oxidation utilization increases, but that's good, right? So there's a disparity between how we interpret performance if it's a training adaptation versus a nutrition intervention, even though the results are the same. So what we see now is in a lot of the literature, and there's some very big names out there right now who say keto is horrible for performance because movement economy is decreased. It's not. If you equate for the changes, it's very similar. And you could say, because nobody actually even equates for how much ATP is created, everybody keeps it on the oxygen side. No one equates for the fact that fat creates about 18% more ATP per molecule than carbs do. even though the oxygen cost is a little higher, you balance it out with the fact that fat creates hundreds of ATP molecules versus carbs are like 30 something, right? The disparity of the ATP production versus the oxygen costs, still fat comes out on top,
Interesting.
right? And we'll just go down the list of things from a performance perspective. Philip Prinz, Professor Noakes, Andrew Kutnick, and others came out with a study last year where it was I believe it was a review, a systematic review of a bunch of different studies where they looked at the crossover point. And if you're not familiar with the crossover point, that is the point of intensity in exercise where the body switches from primarily burning fat at
Mhm,
submaximal intensity
mhm.
to primarily burning carbs at close to max intensity or
In
max intensity. Where's
Interesting.
that point in effort where it crosses over to be primarily carbs or
Yeah,
glucose or glycogen, right?
yeah,
In the normal person, that's anywhere from 65 to 75% of effort.
interesting.
Okay. In a fat adapted person, 85% higher or more,
Wow.
80% or more higher. 85%, which is high intensity, we usually classify as 75% or higher, right? So 75% of VO2 max or higher, we classify as high intensity. So we're saying that now fat adapted athletes can still get most of their energy for exercise at up to 85% intensity in exercise. So we are literally at a point of understanding in bioenergetics where the term glycolytic effort no longer applies,
Interesting.
right? For a fat adapted athlete, glycolytic effort is 85% or higher. We're talking about max effort now. It's no longer just high intensity.
Yeah. I wanted to get your 2 cents on one of the talking points that you brought up and one of the claims that she made in regards to carnivore impairs recovery and performance.
Yeah,
I believe
that's a whole nother one.
Yeah, and I know I'm pretty sure the reason why I'm bringing it up right now is because I know I'm pretty sure you wanted to talk about this one, and that caught my ear too as being a little interesting when she said that, and basically the claim was carnivore impairs recovery, or I believe another way to put it was elite performance is reduced on 0/low carb.
Yeah,
Like,
there's zero substance to that claim.
yeah, so, like, what are
Um,
your maybe to expand on that, like, what are your thoughts there?
yeah, I can. So I'm working on another book, and one part of that book is a whole chapter on high performing ketogenic athletes. Right, I'm doing profiles on about a dozen athletes. There are, I mean, some of them we know. Sean
Mhm.
Baker,
Yeah,
world record holder in probably one of the most glycolytic sports there can be,
rowing.
rowing sprints.
Yeah,
Right,
rowing, yeah.
that doesn't get much more glycolytic than that, and he holds world records, and all he eats is steak, right? Um, Dr. Chafee is another one. Played rugby professionally while carnivore. There's I forget all their names. I want to say Ryan Talbot is the guy's name. Olympic swimmer who's ketogenic. There's a guy. There's a decathlete that's on the list. There's a professional rock climber, world class, out free rock climbing
Mhm.
guy. Um, who else? Obviously, you got guys like Zach Bitter, Michelle Hearn, people that are doing super long distances,
And
mostly ketogenic.
Zach Bitter's an interesting one because he came on the podcast. I had the chance to interview him, and it seems like to me the reason why I bring this up, I don't know exactly uh, what your study with him specifically was, but just for people that know, Zach Bitter like held the record at one point for running 100 miles in 12 hours and something.
Yeah, ridiculous.
He's a ridiculous
Yeah,
athlete, but he just did I saw on Instagram, he just did like another 100-mile run, but he was fueling with carbohydrates.
sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
but
Yes, and there was an interesting study that came out last year as well, out of Philip Prinz again. He's very prolific. They did it's hypoglycemia, carb ingestion during exercise eliminates hypoglycemia in endurance athletes or something like that.
Mhm.
And what they did, and this goes into that level of we're prescribing more carbs than is needed. This is a
Yeah.
really good example of that.
Yeah.
Um, I want to say I have to look it up again. I want to say it was 5K that they did. So it endurance, but also high intensity. They gave them a minimal amount of carbohydrate to ingest during the effort, just enough to combat hypoglycemia.
Interesting.
And both the carb and the keto groups saw about the same percentage increase of performance, right? It was like 2 grams, 3 grams. It wasn't a lot. It was like just
Yeah.
enough.
That
Yeah,
was
it was
that
like, it
small?
was literally a small, super small amount. There's like, hey, just because there's only about 2 grams in our blood.
What was it, just out of curiosity, what was the source of carbohydrate? Was it
I'd
just
have to
straight,
go
like,
look at it. I
straight
don't remember
sugar or
exactly what it was. Yeah, it was
interesting.
a liquid something
Yeah.
that they took. But it just was just an example of, hey, wait a second. Do we need 20, 30 grams every 20 minutes or more?
Interesting.
Right? No, we
Yeah.
probably don't.
Yeah.
We could probably do 2 or 3 grams every half an hour and still be fine. It's just about hypoglycemia. And in some cases, in the next follow-on studies that I am hoping to be involved in is, what if we did the same thing with ketones? Because ketones theoretically, right? It could, because the idea is that it's not blood glucose. Actually, that's the problem. It's energy supply to the brain, right? So if you're familiar with central governor theory, Professor Noak's idea that the brain controls fatigue, and when the brain loses energy, that's when fatigue kicks in, essentially, right? So if you can keep the brain energized through long endurance effort, then you extend fatigue. So the idea in that study was, well, if we can keep the blood sugar high, the brain will have enough energy, then you can extend fatigue. And theoretically, it's the same thing with ketones. If exogenous ketones can keep the brain fueled, will it extend fatigue just the same as if we combat hypoglycemia? So
Mhm.
a lot of cool, fun stuff there. But that's a little
That is
beside the
cool.
point.
Yeah.
Um, the idea is, or the essentially what I'm saying from a performance perspective, fat is a more than enough fuel in pretty much every circumstance, right? The one circumstance where where you may need some carbs as a supplement is that hour and a half, 2 hours or more endurance event where you just to combat hypoglycemia. It's not about muscle glycogen. It's not about glycogen replenishment, right? It's about blood sugar,
Mm.
and that's it. That could work in those scenarios. But what does that mean? That means for CrossFit, weightlifting, gymnastics, soccer, football, baseball, tennis, volleyball, MMA, any other sport we're talking about, you don't need carbs to provide energy for that. You have plenty of muscle glycogen, you have plenty of fat. In and where we get stuck, and I don't know what your specific situation was, right? I don't know how long you were keto, what you were doing for keto, when you were doing
Mhm.
workouts, and that kind of stuff. I know for me, it took about 3 months to start saying, "Hey, wait, I don't feel like shit during my workouts." Right? 3 months of strict not eating any carbs, because metabolic flexibility is an adaptation over time.
Mhm.
Being able to access, and this is where the confusion comes in. We say, "Well, I need carbs to work out," because you keep eating carbs to work out.
Mm. Yeah.
So energy when you're not eating carbs isn't a lack of availability, it's a lack of access. If you stop eating any carbs for 90 days, your body will learn how to access the glycogen that you have, how to break down the fat that you have for energy, how to turn that fat backbone glycerol into more glucose to keep your blood sugar high, how to recycle lactate faster, kick that into gluconeogenesis to make more glucose. All of the internal systems that improve metabolic flexibility will get better. And then you're able to access without needing the external, right? But it takes time. Most people are not willing to take the time because they feel like shit for the first 90 days
Yeah.
and they need to get the cars back in, right? It takes time. Most people don't wait that time. Number one. Number two, and you should know this by now, um, you have to increase your electrolytes. Part of the access is electrolytes. Electrolytes help your body access that energy and process that energy better. So if you are going low carb, if you're going no carb, if you're cutting out carbs and you're trying to improve that metabolic flexibility, you have to have electrolytes available. If you don't have electrolytes, it's going to make that adaptation take longer and you're going to suck more throughout it. So those are the two big things I think we need to, and then thirdly, a lot of people don't eat enough. So eat more, stay consistent. Don't add the carbs back in, even if you feel like crap for a while, and up your electrolytes.
So a handful of years ago, like I was a ketogenic athlete, carnivore athlete, and I was running like a half marathon every month, running marathons. I mean, like I ran a full marathon completely fasted. Like I ran a half marathon on a ketogenic diet in like an hour and 36 minutes.
Have
And I
have you
felt
have you had Alex on yet?
Alex McDonald?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I'm working on a case study we're publishing a case study about what he did.
Um, and Alex, before we jumped on this podcast, Alex is an interesting one. Because, and I was going to get your 2 cents on this one because I thought he was a great guest, phenomenal. And for those that don't know, Alex McDonald is the Australian guy that ran 5 marathons in 5 days, completely fasted, and he was a fat adapted athlete. And he did that more so to prove to people, make a point essentially that you can do these endurance events without carbohydrates. Also, you can do these endurance events as long as you have enough body fat. Like he's very much a numbers guy. He had calculated it out that based off the calories that he had on his frame, because he wasn't incredibly lean. I think he was maybe 16, 17% body fat, 50, somewhere around there when he did the 5 marathons in 5 days. He had calculated out that he had enough fat on his frame to actually run like 22 or 23 marathons,
Right.
which is
He
wild.
lost like, I forget what it was. He lost like 7 pounds or something.
I think if I remember correctly, because I asked him that question and he didn't even lose that much weight, which kind of blew me away for what he did. But, I guess my point here and why I bring him up, and I'm glad you kind of brought him up. My question that I wish I've asked him, and I'm gonna ask you this question here. He did that to say, like, "Hey, you don't need carbs. You can do this." And I did it. I recovered fine. I ran the 5 marathons, boom, 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 back to back to back, and I survived. But just to offer the devil's advocate side of things, what if that was a race, right? What if that was an actual race where it's like you had a group of people that were running 5 marathons in 5 days? Some people were supplementing with carbs. Some people were, him specifically, was a fat adapted athlete, not eating food, whatever the case is. Would that be the best route from a performance perspective? Like I know he was doing it to kind of prove a point, saying, yes, you can do long endurance activities without carbohydrate. You can run off fat as a fuel source, and he did it. But from a performance standpoint, would he have actually increased his times race over race
It would all be,
by bringing in carbs?
yeah, it would all be theoretical based on what we had, the
Yeah,
data we
sure.
have right now. Based on the data we have right now, what we see in the research is that performance is generally no different,
Mm,
regardless. So carb athletes or ketogenic athletes, and this is another one of those misconceptions. It's not detrimental, number one. Number two, performance is the same. You look at just about every single study. Only the only studies that I've seen that indicate a ketogenic diet is worse for performance is either a minimal amount of time, like 4 to 12 days, 4 to 14 days of
mhm,
adaptation time, or only looking at metabolic markers where we get that bias that I was telling you about, where they're looking at oxygen consumption and saying, well, oxygen consumption increased, so they must not be performing as well. Right. And that's not an actual outcome. That's a conceptual conclusion drawn off of metabolic numbers. Right.
mhm,
That's not reporting on did they actually run the same time or was their time to exhaustion the same? Right. When we look at all of those things in conjunction, it's pretty much there's no different. Most of the studies come back, no significant difference in performance. Right. And again, this meta-analysis I told you about, which I can send you the link if you remind me, just came out last month, October 1st this year, that basically says, look, here's all the studies. Um, Endurance is the same. Strength is the same. High intensity effort is the same. All of these things are the same, you know? So there really isn't a case where we could say competitively or performance wise, a ketogenic diet is going to be worse or better. And I think there's a key distinction there,
Mm.
worse or better, because if performance is the same on both, why does it make a difference which one you do? And this goes back to what I said at the very beginning. Individual choice. What are your goals? What is your lifestyle? What are your preferences? What is going to help you stay consistent longer?
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you're one of those people who I just have to have a sweet potato once a week, then maybe more of a higher carb ketogenic or a low carb diet is better for you. If you're
Mm-hmm.
cool and lazy like me, where I can literally and do just eat ground beef and eggs every day and I don't give a crap because I'm lazy and I got better things to do than worry about my food,
Mm-hmm.
and I can perform just fine eating as long as I eat enough, then carnivore is fine for me.
Mm-hmm.
If a performance is going to be the same, what's the difference? I think lifestyle preference is one. And number two, understanding there are metabolic impacts and are you okay with dealing with it?
Mm.
Right?
Yeah,
With
there's
carbs,
trade-offs. Yeah.
with carbs, documented comes increased inflammation, increased glycation, increased glycemic variability, and in many cases, increased gut or digestive issues. Those are the most common things when we talk about carbs. They perform great, but they burn dirty as opposed
Got
to
it.
fat, right? So can they both work? 100%. There's no right or wrong answer. What are you willing to work with? But I just want to impress on everybody listening, no matter what mechanism or reasoning or convoluted connection of scientific terms that people come up with, there's no requirement for carbs.
I have
You can
another
do everything that you need to do to be healthy and perform without them if you choose to.
let's talk muscle building specifically, right? Like let's just talk bodybuilding real quick because going back to Dr. Sarah Zaldivar and some of the claims that she was making was
Need
you need
carbs.
carbs to build muscle.
Yeah. Also
And
factually
and to
incorrect.
be honest with you, like I was seeing a lot of the comments come through. Like I personally don't necessarily believe that. Like I built muscle fine when I was strict keto and on a carnivore diet, but I do think and this is what she said, you're essentially capped out. You have a limit.
It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
Okay. Let's go into that because I mean if you were to sample most bodybuilders, and I know you were saying that there are outliers in most, elite athletes are on performance enhancing drugs or professional athletes, which I agree with you. But let's just talk about like if you were to sample most bodybuilders, yes, like there are the Robert Sykes of the world who's a ketogenic bodybuilder. Dude looks freaking fantastic, right? But um in terms of building muscle and moving past plateaus in the gym as it regards to building muscle, not necessarily an endurance event. We're not running marathons. Is there an argument for bringing in carbs to move past plateaus you might be seeing on a carnivore diet?
There's nothing mechanistically that shows that does anything at all.
Okay.
So there are several studies out there that look at carb ingestion or ketogenic athletes, powerlifters, bodybuilders, strength athletes, that where strength and muscle mass were identical,
Mhm.
no difference, right? But the strength athletes who were on keto diet maintained their muscle mass but lost body fat. So now this is where we talk about the benefit actually comes from a body weight to strength ratio. Now improves because they've lost weight, but they haven't lost strength or muscle mass,
Mm.
right? So that's one aspect. The other aspect, if you look at the mechanisms of muscle protein synthesis, where there's carbs aren't in there. Insulin's not even in there. All right. So I wrote an article a few months ago that I ran across a study. I looked at some references in that study, read some more studies. I read about 5 or 6 different studies. And I was like, I need to take a break and go to bed and come back and look at this again, because I found a handful of studies that basically all of the conclusions from these studies was insulin's not what we've been told. Insulin is not some super anabolic thing that's going to absolutely increase how your body builds muscle. And I don't remember if we talked about this on the first video or not.
I can't remember, but this was
Um,
something I wanted to talk to you about today, so I
yeah.
think you're gonna touch on it now.
So I wrote it. There's an article I wrote about it on my blog. I have all of the papers listed, but basically what the conclusion was is that we don't actually have any data that shows that muscle protein synthesis is increased through insulin in the absence of excess amino acids. They can't tell the difference between muscle protein synthesis being stimulated by the amino acids or if it's because of the insulin, right? And the conclusions are basically if you have excess amino acids, muscle protein synthesis is going to be increased. We don't think insulin really has a role. So it helps your body absorb amino acids to a point, but nothing about insulin actually increases muscle protein synthesis, right? And if you're already eating a diet that stimulates insulin, as anybody should, which you can do without carbs, okay? I can stimulate insulin just as well with my steak and eggs as anybody else can with their bread and peanut butter,
Mhm.
right? The difference is I'm maintaining a baseline that keeps me from having extreme oxidative stress, from having high glycemic index, glycemic response, and then a crash, and my insulin going up and my insulin going down, and all this happening where I can simulate it to a point, keep it there for longer so the area under the curve is the same without stressing my system,
Mm.
right? So fat and protein combined in a good bolus in a meal is going to be a more healthy way to stimulate insulin. It's going to last longer, which means any effect of insulin helping push amino acids is going to be a longer effect, which is going to last in that anabolic window that is 48 to 72 hours long, not right after a workout and you have to eat 30 minutes after exercise, right? So there's a lot of stuff that we've been told about how to improve anabolic processes and eat in a certain way that just is flat out wrong. We
Mm.
don't need insulin in excess in order to build muscle. The only three things we need to build muscle: protein, adequate stimulus, adequate recovery. That's it. The energy you have available, let's think about it this way. Well, but I need the carbs to fuel my exercise. Okay, let's talk about that. If I eat a bunch of carbs before an exercise, then let's say that all goes straight to my muscles. Okay, cool. But what about the 700 grams of glycogen I already have stored in my body? An average workout takes 2 to 250 calories, or
Mhm.
let's just say not calories, grams of
Mhm.
glucose. If I'm
Okay.
working, if I'm working nonstop, if I'm lifting weights nonstop for an hour, I'm going to burn maybe 350 grams of glucose or glycogen, which means if we didn't consider recovery time and I worked out again, I would still have an entire workouts left in my body. If I didn't take breaks, if I literally lifted weights for an hour straight, and who does that? Right? A lot of these people talking about, well, you need these carbs for your exercise aren't considering that most workouts have rest periods.
Yeah.
You're changing from exercise to exercise.
Yeah.
You're not working for an hour nonstop, particularly if you're doing any sport. The only one you're doing nonstop is if you're running or doing an endurance effort,
Yeah.
right? Everything else you get a break, even in CrossFit, right? You may work hard doing your lifts at the beginning of class. Let's say you're doing CrossFit Total. Okay, I did 3 lifts today. How strenuous was that? Right? Central nervous system fatigue, maybe, but
Yeah.
from a glycolytic perspective, not really.
Yeah.
It's mostly PCR, right? It's mostly
Yeah.
phosphogene. Okay, let's say we come in, we do fight gone bad. Well, there was 17 minutes gone. Now
Yeah.
what am I doing for the rest of class?
Yeah.
Right? So it's not like you're even using the average amount in most classes in a CrossFit environment.
Mhm.
So you have enough. If you never replenished and never ate anything, much like Alex and the marathons, I would love to see somebody fast and do a week of CrossFit classes completely fasted. Totally doable.
Mhm.
Absolutely, totally doable, especially if you have body fat, because body fat breaks down and provides glucose. Body fat itself provides energy. So there is nothing to be, there's no mechanistic reason for the claims that you can't build muscle or improve strength on a ketogenic diet.
Interesting. Going back to what she was saying, because I know we were touching on this a little bit earlier in terms of
We
carbs.
talked about recovery. That's right. I totally
Yeah.
forgot about that. Yeah.
No, no, no. It was, I just wanted to come back to that because I know we went on. I had a couple other questions in there that kind of threw us off a little bit. But yeah, that going back to that one question earlier, carbs improving recovery. I guess because when she said that, like I said earlier, like that did kind of catch my ear, and I was like, I don't know about that, but I don't really know what your thoughts were on that.
So that crosses over into the muscle building piece, right?
Yeah.
Where
Yep.
people have this connection for whatever reason that you need carbs to replenish glycogen, right? So we also know that that's not a thing, right? Number one, if you're fat adapted, you're not using as much. Number two, as we've seen in the FASTER study way back in the early 2010s, right? Finney and Volek, they showed that glycogen store replenishment is the same. So whether you're fat adapted or carb fueled, your body's going to have the glycogen that it has. You may start with less, but your body's going to end about the same. And then it's going to be replenished just fine, right? Because again, particularly if you're accessing body fat, those triglycerides stored in your adipose tissue are breaking down to provide energy and substrates to be turned into glucose, right? So fat adaptation by definition is a way to improve and restore glycogen. There's a reason why this internal process supports everything, right? And every time you eat carbs to get energy, you are telling that system it doesn't need to work. Take a break, right? So yes, that is where the recovery thing comes in. In fact, this goes back to what I said before, and I had a post about this recently. I just learned that fat oxidation is actually more stressful than carb oxidation. And this is one of the claims that some people are making is why you should be burning carbs, not fat. This is a really good example of looking at the mechanism, not the whole story. At the cellular level, carb oxidation creates less reactive oxygen species, free radicals, than fat oxidation does. So it is technically creating less oxidative stress. Okay. That's where conveniently the story is ending for people who are pushing carbs. Because in that one mechanism, the utilization and breakdown of carbs or the breakdown of fats into its components to be done with whatever it needs to be done with, particularly for energy, carbs are less stressful. Oh my God, everyone needs carbs because they cause less stress. What they're not telling you is that where that process happens in the cell makes a difference. So in the mitochondria, aerobic glycolysis, the breakdown of glucose using oxygen happens, we could say, further outside, closer to the outside of the mitochondria, closer to the inside of the cell, the cytoplasm. That area of the mitochondria is not primed with all of the cofactors and substrates it needs to really manage that oxidative stress. So it's less stress, but the cell is less capable of dealing with it, right? The anaerobic glycolysis, the glycolysis that happens outside of the mitochondria, where there is no oxygen, is even less capable of managing that oxidative stress. So it's less of a fire, but not really the best fire management system. Okay.
Hmm.
Inside the mitochondria, it's a lot of fire, much more oxidative stress. But inside the mitochondria, deep inside where fat is oxidized, it is designed to manage that stress, right? So I equate it to, do you want to use since I already said fire, we'll use the fire analogy. It's our body's burning carbs is equivalent to a small town being on fire in the 1700s, right? It's a small fire. There's not a lot of property there, but it takes the entire town with buckets going from the well or the pond that's half a mile away, trying to put the fire out. And it could potentially destroy the town,
Got it.
right? Whereas what happens in the cell inside the mitochondria when it's fat burning is it could be a really big fire. It could be like downtown New York, where there's half a block on fire and it's a 4 alarm fire. But we have the equipment, we have fire hydrants on every corner, we have the processes and the people and the trained firefighters, and everybody knows exactly what to do, how to put it out and keep it under control without destroying the entire city.
Hmm.
Right? So that's the difference. Bigger fire, better management, less overall impact in the big picture.
Interesting. That's an
Right?
interesting way to put it, but
So
that
when
makes
we look
sense.
at the big picture, yes, technically carbs cause less oxidative stress, but systemically, it's a bigger negative impact.
Interesting.
So from a inflammation, from a recovery perspective, overall allostatic stress increases with carbs than it does with fat because there's less management capability. That's one area. The second area is glycation. And this is something that I learned about probably it's been within the last year, because this was my issue before I went carnivore and I didn't know it. I've been carnivore for almost 8 years and I just learned about this within the last year and the light bulb went off in my head. That was my problem. We talked about I had IBS, I had,
Hmm.
some issues, but one of my biggest issues was constantly getting injured. Right? I had torn meniscus in my knee, both torn labrums in my shoulders, constant groin pulls, constant calf pulls, constant hamstring pulls. Everything just hurt all the time. I found out recently that glycation, right, the extreme glycemic response over time builds up and glycates collagen proteins in your joints and ligaments and muscles. So extreme carbohydrate intake over time increases inflexibility in tissue and increases in injury. And
Interesting.
because after 90 days to 6 months, I started noticing all my pain going away. I could work out more. I went from 2 days a week being a great thing to I'm doing 6 days a week now. And the only thing that I did was stop eating plants, stop eating carbs. And it's like, that makes so much sense. It connected that dot for me
Hmm.
as to where that was coming from. So understanding that the glycemic response, right, advanced glycation end products can collect in soft tissue and cause injury.
Interesting.
There's plenty of studies on that causing psoriasis, causing joint and ligament issues and joint issues in cartilage, causing ligament issues in the elderly. There's a whole bunch of papers out there on AGEs and its impact on the musculoskeletal system. So that's another area where carbs could potentially increase injury, decrease training volume, and impact health over time.
And going back to what she was saying too, though, and what you were also saying, it's dose dependent, right? It depends on how many carbs you're actually bringing in. Like if you're bringing in like a ridiculous amount of carbohydrate, you're gonna see some of those issues and potentially run into some of those problems. But if it's measured appropriately, then is there is there a chance where you might not run into those issues?
There's always a chance. I mean, I don't know if we've done I doubt there's any there I would think it's safe to say that we have no idea how to determine what that dose dependency is on an individual basis or time dependency.
Hmm.
Because it could be one dose for 6 months, it could be one dose for 10 years. That could indicate that where you could see an indication of a problem. So I think that's gotta be individual, right? I
Yeah,
think
for sure.
and this is where the message is again, you don't need it. So don't for anybody who's not doing carbs, you don't need to be afraid by what anybody's saying, you're fine, right? But if you do have them and you're afraid of going off of them, understand, just start tracking. Like, you're probably not tracking. What are the things that you need to track? What am I actually getting in a day? Maybe I can do with less. Maybe I am trying to get 500 grams of carbs a day because that's what everybody says you need as a CrossFit athlete. I would bet that if you tried, you could get down to 150 or 200 grams a day as a CrossFit athlete and be perfectly fine.
Hmm.
Because here's another we'll throw in a hack, right? We'll throw in a hack for anybody that really likes their carbs and wants their carbs. Okay? This would be Coach Bronson's unofficial tip to leverage the benefits of fat adaptation, but still get your carbs. Right? You ready for this?
Yeah.
So it has been shown that the metabolic benefits of being fat adapted persist for a period of time after fat adaptation, even after the inclusion of carbs.
Hmm.
So if you're curious about what would it be like if I was fat adapted, go completely carb free for 90 days. See if you feel any different. Make sure you're eating enough. You probably need to eat more than you're used to. Get enough water and electrolytes. And what was the third thing? There's three things. I forget. Make sure you get enough fat, obviously, but
Yeah.
there's one other thing. It'll come to me. But make sure you're doing that well. Get that adaptation in place, and then and be consistent, right? Don't throw any carbs in that time. And then if you feel fantastic, you can decide, do I want to even try putting carbs back in or not? That's up to you. If you want to try putting carbs in, put in a little bit at a time. You'll still carry some of those benefits of being metabolically flexible over for a period, right? And you could theoretically, let's say you did 3 months of primer into keto, right? Or carnivore. And then you did maybe a month of increasing carbs back. And maybe you kind of cycled in and out of that over a period of time, right? To maybe you start noticing that metabolic flexibility starts going down again. You start losing some of that energy workouts, and you start, if you get to the point where you're like, I need my pre-workout carbs, that's
Hmm.
when you know you've lost that metabolic flexibility,
Got it.
right? So then you can say, oh, okay, let's get back into the metabolic flexibility. Let's get back into the fat adaptation and try to improve that. So there could be a way. I'm totally right now pulling this out of my butt, but it makes sense where you could say, hey, look, I know the benefits of being metabolically flexible and fat adapted can persist even after I introduce carbs for a while. Maybe there's a way that I can cycle in and out. So it's technically a cyclic ketogenic diet, but it's more of a longitudinal look instead of like a weekly or a daily or a by workout kind of thing.
Makes
Hey,
sense.
maybe you do a little bit more carbs every fourth month or something like that, right?
And
Just from a
this is almost what I'm
sustainability, I
doing
want
now.
some carbs, something like that.
Honestly, this is kind of what I'm almost doing right now. Like the majority of the year, I am very low carb, almost zero carb, ketogenic carnivore. And then at some points throughout the year, especially like as we get into like kind of like right now, like wintertime where it's colder outside, I'll usually do like strength training programs or like a squat program, just to like, I'm not outside running as much, I kind of like switch it up. And then I might try throwing in some carbs. But what I would say is I do see I do see improvements in strength when I bring carbs in. I'm not as flat. And I don't know what that is, maybe it's the water
It's
retention,
electrolytes. It's electrolytes.
but I mean, I supplement with a shitload of electrolytes, like, throughout the year, especially when I'm running. I'm in Texas, it's 100 degrees, like, I'm
Yeah.
I'm pumping electrolytes, like,
When you
I'm constantly drinking
yeah,
electrolytes, you know what I
yeah,
mean? But it's weird because I do notice improvements in strength when bringing in the carbs, but what I will tell you is I'm stiff. I'm stiff, man, like, going back to what you were saying earlier in regards to the glycation around the joints, ligaments, tendons. I'm stiff, but I am stronger. And so
yeah,
maybe going back to what you're saying, these are what I need to understand and be aware of is, are these some of the trade-offs? Am I okay making some of these
right.
trade-offs
That's
for
all it
whatever
is.
the case?
That's all it is. And
Yeah.
f I would be curious to know, like, when you say low carb, what do you mean low carb? Like, when you're doing low carb ketogenic?
Like the carbs that I might be getting in throughout the day are trace amounts of carbs that you would probably carrots, like, that you
Okay.
would find in
Are you
carrot
tracking at
vegetables.
all?
Vegetables. I was tracking for a long time, and then right now it's just as much protein as I possibly can, fat. Like, I can lay out to you what I eat on a basically what I
How much fat are you getting in a day?
so I've over time, I've lowered my fat. So I have kind of gone to more of like a Ted Naiman approach, where it's like protein to energy. So, like, I'm probably getting like, I eat a high protein diet, moderate fat, low carb. And that works really, really well for me in just terms of overall how I feel. I get the benefits of how I want to feel. So I probably will crush 200 grams of protein in a day, around about 100 grams of fat,
Yeah,
and my
yeah.
carbs are probably 20 and under.
Okay, up your fat. If
up
you
my
wanna feel
fat.
better in your workouts, up your fat.
Here's the one problem though I run into when I up my fat. I run into digestive issues.
How many meals a day are you eating?
I'll eat 2 meals a day, but I'm just, like, not hungry in the morning, so I usually will work out fasted, and that's usually at 8 AM I'll work out. I'll have, like, a protein shake after that, and then I'll eat around 11:30 noon. Usually that's, like, chicken breast, burger patty, and some veggies,
Put some
carrots.
fat in your protein shake?
I don't put any fat in the protein shake. I'm almost worried about that because that might send me to the bathroom. If I have a lot of fat on an empty stomach, that'll send me to the toilet.
Okay, so it sounds to me like so particularly this is something I see. I actually have a chapter. So I have an ebook out called the
Sure.
Ketogenic Athlete's Playbook. And I have a chapter in there, athletes need more fat
Mhm.
because it's one of the biggest there's a difference in how we approach sports nutrition than lifestyle nutrition, right? And we look at sports nutrition, we do a lot more as athletes than the average person. So when I give macros to somebody who's calling me and saying, "Hey, I'm trying to lose weight, get rid of my insulin resistance, get this hypertension under control, whatever it may be," I'm giving them a different thing than I'm giving somebody who's doing CrossFit 4 days a week
Mhm.
and trying to crush PRs, right?
Mhm.
It's a different plan. And one of the differences is increasing fat intake. So there
Interesting.
might be an adaptation to having you slowly increase your fat intake so your body can handle that without
Okay.
having digestive issues where you could, because you're probably running about 16%, 15% body fat or less.
I'm probably well, I would say up until about a month ago, I was probably about 11 or
Oh,
12%.
so you're lower than that. Yeah. So the leaner you are,
Yeah,
the more you probably need to eat as well, right? So
interesting.
you're getting closer to now. Minimum body fat on a man, I think, is like 4%. You could get down to 4% before people start going, "Oh my God, you're gonna die."
Yeah,
But effectively, from your body's ability to access it, and I usually start seeing energy issues in men around 8 and 11, between 8 and 11%. Right. So when you start getting in that 11, 10%, it's what happened to me as well. When I got to,
mhm,
I had a period when I was at like 9 and 10%, and my
mhm,
workouts were like, gosh, man, what is going on? I needed to eat more.
mm,
Right. So it wasn't necessarily because didn't have carbs. I just needed more fat in my diet.
interesting. So maybe I should try playing around with, because like again, I do like a natural intermittent fasting thing. It just works well for my schedule, my day. Like I don't eat breakfast, but maybe I'll try maybe what I could try, because also too, I don't like eating before I work out. Like it just does not work well for me.
Sure.
Like
Sure.
I just feel great working out fasted, but maybe I should try to go back to what would you recommend then if I wanted to bring in more fat? Could I bring in more fat, like, in the morning? Like, maybe almost like a bulletproof coffee or something? Would that
That's what I
be
was saying. So I would highly recommend, and I don't have an agreement with them. I just love them.
Mhm,
They do help. They do give us. They do sponsor a prize for our talks on Sundays where people
mhm.
get a free bag. But I do keto brains in my coffee every morning.
Keto brains?
Keto brains. It's a nootropic MCT coffee
Okay,
powder.
okay, but basically,
Right.
like, I could
That
throw in,
could
like,
be a
I
way,
can
or you
throw in
yeah,
MCT
throw in some
oil.
MCT or
Got
butter or
it.
something like that in the coffee. Just up that fat a little bit, and I think you
Okay.
might see some benefit there. And you might be
Perfect.
surprised. You might be able to get to where you're doing a lot more, right? Like, it wouldn't surprise me with your leanness and what are you doing, 4 days a week?
In terms of working out, no, I basically work out 7 days a week.
Okay, so
Like,
you're doing 7 days a week. So
yeah.
if you're
I'm doing something
doing
7 days a week for sure.
something
Yeah.
7 days a week, it would not surprise me. I'll throw out a number. I'll say I could see you adding another 50 grams in and being fine. From a body
Mhm.
composition perspective, right? And doing better from an energy and your workout perspective.
Interesting. I think I'm gonna try that then,
Yeah.
for sure.
Good. I'd love to hear how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Bronson, this was awesome, man. Were before we wrap up, was there anything else you specifically wanted to touch on? Because I know we got to some
Dude,
of
I
the
had 12 things on this list.
Yeah,
I think we actually covered most of everything.
yeah.
Actually, yeah, we did. We covered that. We covered all the stuff. No, I think we're good. I think everybody needs to remember it's an individual thing, right? No matter what anybody says, what works for you works for you. And, there's no requirement for carbs, but if you want them, a case can be made. But at the same time, just because a case doesn't can be made doesn't mean you need to do it. So, there can be some specific cases from a sustainability preference, pleasurableness, if that's a word, right? Some people need that variety or are looking for something other than just, ground beef and eggs every day. And they want to do something and, have some other stuff. That's perfectly fine if you can make it work. As long as you're seeing progress based on how you've defined where you want to go and what progress looks like, nothing's wrong. Okay. I'm only addressing the information that I see being put out there to justify other people's decisions that I don't think are accurate in their explanations.
Well said. Well said. And before we wrap up, I know you were mentioning a handful of different things that you were working on. For instance, getting your doctorate. That's pretty awesome. Anything new coming up for you that you want to drop here?
Gosh,
Sounds like
no,
there's a lot going on, man.
I'm working on my 4th book. Right now, the name of the 4th book is The New Essentials of Sports Nutrition. That will probably be a couple years in the writing. Um, I've got a paper that just came out, like I said, with Professor Noakes and some others. Um, we've got a bunch more papers coming out. Like I said, I'm working on a case study for Alex on his triathlon or his marathon stuff. So
That's
hopefully
cool.
that can get published by the end of the year. Um, there's a paper I'm working on with Dr. Mark Cucuzella, who was a VA doctor, where he did. It's really fascinating. He, as a VA doctor, he was not allowed to prescribe low carb or ketogenic nutrition as an intervention, right? But what he did do was provide like a 10-minute, hey, here's this thing. Here's a little pamphlet on what it is. If you have any questions, go to this website or check this book out and do your own thing. Just in that 5 or 10-minute, here's what low carb looks like. Here's a little how-to guide. I can't prescribe it. I'm just giving information, whatever. Um, he tracked the results over a year of like 400 patients. Improvements in A1C, improvements in hypertension, reduction in BMI, reduction in obesity rankings, reduction in medication, right? Not even
Cool.
from an official intervention, just by saying, hey, here's another option, completely changed hundreds of people's lives. So we're doing a case report on that. And then there's a handful of other studies that we got working on. Like I said, looking at carb supplementation and CrossFit, looking at the duration of ketogenic adaptation and its impact on performance, right? We're looking at every study we can possibly find on ketogenic athletes, how long they were in their intervention, and then what the performance outcome was to see if length of adaptation makes a difference in outcome. And we are seeing some very interesting numbers. I'm not going to say what those are yet, but we're seeing some very interesting numbers that hopefully lead to my dream would be that would lead to something that we could propose as a framework for scientific study to say, if you're doing ketogenic studies or research, here's the framework for what adaptation frame timeline should look like if you
So
want these
cool.
results, right? So, but that'll probably be next year sometime by the time we finish that. So yeah, there's a handful of things going on.
That's awesome, man. Good for you. Good for you, man. Keep hustling, man. I certainly appreciate that. So that's great. And you put out great content. And in terms of that, where can people find you online, get in contact with you, all that
Yeah,
good
yeah.
stuff?
Just coachbronson.com, coach.bronson on all the social medias.
Very good. Awesome. Well, this was great, Bronson. Appreciate your time. And to you guys watching and listening to the Low Carb Consultant podcast, we'll catch you guys on the next one.